Om Brahmanandam Paramasukdam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dandvatītam Gagan Sadrisham Tattvamasiyadilakshayam Ekam Nityam Vimlamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshibhutam Bhavatītam Triguణrahitam Sadguru Tam Namami. Shivoham friends. So today we are going to conclude this third book on creation, Utpatti Khanda, and we are on chapter 121. And in this chapter, the reality of King Lavana's dream is explained and proof of the futility of mind is revealed. And the tribal is continuing here and saying, O Lord of man, after lapse of some time, there occurred a famine in this place, owing to the drought of rain, which broke down all men under its dire pressure. Pressed by extreme scarcity, all our village people scattered far abroad, and they perished in famine and never returned. From then on, O Lord, we are exposed to utmost misery. We sit here lamenting in our helpless poverty. Behold us, Lord, all bathed in tears, falling profusely from our never drying eyelids. Now Vasishtha is saying, at hearing these words from the mouth of the elderly lady, the king was lost in wonder. Looking at the face of his follower, the faithful minister, he remained in dumb amazement like a figure in a picture. He reflected repeatedly on this strange occurrence and its curious concurrence with his adventures in the dream. He made repeated queries relating to other circumstances. The more he heard and learned, the more he found their coincidence with the concurrences of his vision. He sympathized with their sorrows and saw them in the same state as he had seen them before in his dream. Then he gave suitable gifts and presents to relieve their wants and sorrows. He stayed there alone and pondered on the decrees of destiny. Then the wheel of fortune brought him back to his house, where he entered amidst the loud cheers and low salutations of the citizen. In the morning, the king appeared in his court hall, and sitting there amidst his courtiers, he asked me, how is it, sage, that my dream has come to be verified in my presence to each item, and to my great surprise, they answered me exactly and to the very point all that I asked of them. They have removed the doubt in my mind of their truth. Like winds disperse the clouds of heaven. Know this, O Ram, it is the illusion of ignorance that is the cause of a great many errors. It makes the untruth appear as truth and represents sober reality as unreality. Ram said, tell me, sage, how could the dream be verified? It is a mysterious account that cannot find a place in my understanding. Vasishtha replied, O Ram, everything is possible to the illusion of ignorance, which shows the fallacy of a picture in a pot. Illusion represents the actual occurrences of life as dreams, and dreams as realities. Distance appears to be near, and a distant mountain seen in the mirror, you can see this. A long time seems a short interval, as in a night of undisturbed repose. What is untrue seems to be a truth, And as in dreaming one's own death in the sleep, that which is impossible appears as possible, as in flying in a dream. This table seems unsteady, as in the false notion of the motion of fixed objects to one passing in a vehicle. The unmoving seem to be moving to one under the influence of inebriation. The mind, infatuated by its interest, sees all that it thinks upon within itself as exposed to its views. It sees things in the same light as they are painted in his fancy, whether they exist or not, real or unreal. As soon as the mind contracts its ignorance by its false notions of I and you, it becomes subject to endless errors without beginning, middle, or end. It is notion that gives shape to all things. It makes a kalp age appear as a moment, and it prolongs a moment of time to a whole kalp. A man deprived of understanding believes himself to have become a sheep and a fighting ram, thinks himself to be a lion in his ideal bravery. Ignorance causes the blunder of taking things for what they are not, and falling into the errors of I and you. All errors in the mind produce errors in actions also. It is by mere accident that men come into possession of the objects of their desire, and it is the custom that determines the mode of mutual dealings. Lavana's memory of his dream, living in with the tribals of Pukpush, was the internal cause that represented to him the external picture of that place, as if it were a reality. As the human mind is liable to forget many things that it had actually done, so it is susceptible to remember those acts as true which were never done but merely had been thought upon in the mind. In this matter, or say in this manner, as long as I am thinking of having eaten something, it appears true to me, even though I am really fasting. The thought that I have been in a distant country in a dream appears true to me while I think the thought. This is how the king came to find the same Khanda where the tribals lived by the Vindhya mountains. He had been impressed with its notion in his dream, as said before. Again, Lavana's false dream of the tribals took possession of their minds also. The notion of Lavana settled in the minds of the tribals, just like the thoughts of these people arose in the mind of the king. The same sentiments and figures of his speech occur to different poets of distant ages and countries. So it should not be unexpected that the same thoughts and ideas should rise simultaneously in the minds of different men. In common experience, we find notions and ideas stand for the things themselves. Otherwise, nothing is known to exist at all without our mind's notion or idea of it. One idea embraces many others under it, like those of the waves and currents are contained under that of water. So one thought is associated by others relating to its past, present, and future conditions. Just as the thought of a seed accompanies the thought of its past and future states and its fruits and flowers of the tree. Nothing is an entity or known entity, and nothing can be said to exist or not exist unless we have a positive idea of its existence or a negative notion of its known existence. All that we see in our error is as non-existent as oil in sand. In reality, the bracelet is nothing but a form of the substance of gold. A fallacy can have no connection with the reality. just as the fallacy of the world with the reality of God, the fallacy of the ring with the substance of God, and of the serpent with the rope. The connection or mutual relation of things of the same kind is quite evident in our minds. The relationship between gum resin and the tree is one of dissimilar union and affords no distinct ideas except that the tree contains the gum. As all things are full of the spirit, so we have distinct ideas of them in our minds. Minds are also spiritual substances. They are not like dull material which have no feelings. All things in the world are intellectually true and real. Therefore, we have their ideas impressed in our minds. There cannot be a relationship or connection between two dissimilar things which may be lasting but are never united together. Without such mutual relation of things, no idea of both can be formed together. Similar things being joined together from the wholes of the same kind, presenting one form different from the other. Presenting one form and differing in nothing. Consciousness being joined with an abstract idea produces an invisible inner and uniform thought. Dull matter joined to another dull objects forms a denser material object to view, but consciousness and material can never unite together because of their differing natures. The intellectual and material parts of a person can never be drawn together in any picture. The material picture lacks the intellectual part, which has consciousness and the power of knowledge. Intellectual beings don't take into account the different material things like wood and stone, which combine for some useful purpose, such as building a house. The relationship between the tongue and the taste is also homogeneous. Taste and the instrument of tasting are both watery substances, and there is no heterogeneous relation between them. But there is no relation between consciousness and matter, like there is no relation between stone and wood. Consciousness cannot combine with wood and stone to form anything. Spiritually considered, all things are alike because they are full of the same spirit. Otherwise, the error of distinction between the viewer and the view creates endless differences. The combination of unseen spirits is easily conceived because the spirits can assume any form at one's pleasure and having no end. Know, you who seek truth, that all things are identical with the entity of God. Renounce your knowledge of known entities and the various kinds of errors and fallacies, and know the all is one, and know the one as all. Consciousness is full with its knowledge, so there is nothing lacking in us. Consciousness presents us everything in its circumference. Just like imagination in its wide range shows us the sites of its air-built castles and everything beside. To him there is no limit of time or place, but his presence extends over all his creation. Ignorance separates the creator from its separate creation and raises the errors of I and you. Forgetting the knowledge of the substance of God, man contracts the error of taking it for the form of ornament. The mistake of jewelry for gold is like taking one thing for another and mistaking the production for the producer. The error of phenomena vanishes upon loss of its sights, and the differences among the pieces of jewelry is lost in the substance of gold. The knowledge of unity removes that of a distinct creation, just as the knowledge of clay takes away the sense of toy soldiers made from it. The same Brahma causes the error of the reality of the exterior worlds, just as the underlying sea causes the error of waves on its surface. The same wood is mistaken for the card figure, and common clay is mistaken for the pot made of it. Between sight and its object lies the eye of the beholder, which is beyond the sight of its viewer, and is neither the view nor the viewer. The mind traversing from one place to another leaves the body in between, which is neither moving nor quite unmoved, because only its mental part is in motion. Remain always in that quiet state which is not waking, dreaming, or sleeping, and which is not the state of consciousness or unconsciousness, but one of everlasting tranquility and rest. Drive away your dullness and remain always in the company of your sound intellect, like a solid rock, whether in joy or grief. Commit your soul to your Maker. There is nothing to lose or earn in this world. Therefore, remain in uniform joy and bliss, whether you think yourself to be blessed or unblessed in life. The soul residing in your body neither loves or hates anything at any time. Therefore, rest in quiet and fear nothing for what happens to your body. Don't engage your mind with the actions of your body. Remain free from anxiety about the present, just as you are unconcerned about the future. Never be impelled by the impulses of your mind, but remain steadfast in your trust in the true God. Be unconcerned with all and remain as an absent man. Let your heart remain detached from everything, like a block of stone or a toy made of wood. Look with the spiritual light of your soul and see your mind as an inanimate thing. As there is no water in stone or fire in water, so the spiritual man has no mental action, nor does the divine spirit have any. If something unseen should ever come to do any action, that action is not attributed to the unseen agent, but to something else in the mind. The uncontrolled selfish man who follows the dictates of his fickle and willful mind resembles a man of borderland following the customs of outcasts and barbarians. Having disregarded the dictates of your vile mind, you may remain at ease and as fearless as an unconscious statue made of clay. He who understands that there is no such thing as the mind, or that he had one before, but it is dead in him today, becomes as immovable as a marble statue with this assurance in himself. There being no appearance of the mind in any case, and you having no such thing in you, in reality except your soul? Why do you vainly infer its existence for your own error and harm? Those who vainly subject themselves to the false apparition of the mind are mostly men of unsound understandings who bring destruction on themselves instead of the full moon of the pure soul. Remain firm as you are with yourself by casting your fancied and fanciful mind far away from you. Be free from the thoughts of the world by being settled in the thought of the Supreme Soul. They who follow a known existence, such as the unreal mind, are like fools who shoot at the empty air and are cast into the shade. He who has cleansed off his mind is indeed a man of great understanding. He has gone across the error of the existence of the world and has become purified in his soul. We have considered long, we have never found anything like the impure mind in the pure soul. With this, chapter 121 is ended, and in chapter 122, there is ascertainment of the self or soul. Vasishtha said, after the birth of a man and a slight development of his understanding, he should associate with the company of good and wise men. Except by the light of scriptures and association with the good and wise, there is no way to cross the river of ignorance that run in its constant course, flowing in thousand streams. By reasoning, man is able to discern what is good for him and what he must avoid. Then he arrives to that ground of reason which is known as goodwill, or a desire to do what is good and keep away from what is bad and evil. Then he is led by his reason to the power of reasoning, discerning truth from untruth and right from wrong. As he improves in knowledge, he gets rid of his improper desires and purifies his mind from all worldly cares. Then he is said to have gained that state of knowledge which is called the purity of his soul and mind and of his heart and conduct. When a yogi or adept attains full knowledge, he is said to have arrived at the stage of goodness. By this means and the curtailing of his desires, he arrives at the state called detachment or indifference to all worldly matters, and he is no more subject to the consequence of his actions. From the curtailment of desires, a yogi learns to withdraw his mind from the unrealities of the world. Whether sitting inactive in samadhi meditation or doing anything for himself or others, he must fix his mind to whatever produces real good to the world. His soul, being cooled by the faintness of his desires, is habituated to do its duties without the knowledge of what it is doing. Truly, he who has subdued his mind has reached the contemplative stage of yoga meditation. Thus, one who has his mind dead in himself learns by practice of years to perform his duties by refraining from his thoughts of external objects. Such a one is said to have attained Turiya, or the fourth stage of his spiritual elevation, and has become liberated in his lifetime. He is not glad to get anything or sorry to miss it. He lives without fear of accidents and is content with whatever he gets. O Ram, you have known whatever is to be known by man. You certainly have extinguished your desire in all your actions through life. Your thoughts are all spiritual and transcend the actions of the physical body. Though you are in your embodied state, don't give yourself to joy or grief, but know you are free from decay and defect. Spiritually, you are a pure and bright substance that is omnipresent, ubiquitous, and ever in its ascendancy, devoid of pleasure and pain, and of death and disease. Why do you lament at or loss of a friend when you are so friendless in yourself? Being thrown alone in this world, whom do you claim as a friend of your soul? We see only the particles of matter of which this body is composed. It exists and passes away from its place in its time, but there is no rising or falling of the soul. Being imperishable in yourself, why do you fear to fall into nothing? Why think of the destruction of your soul, which is never subject to death? When a jar is broken in two, its emptiness is not lost, but mixes with the air. The body being destroyed, the indestructible soul is not lost with it. As the sunlight that causes the appearance of river in a mirage is not lost at the disappearance of the apparent river, so the immortal soul doesn't perish upon dissolution of the frail body. There is a certain illusion which raises false appetites within us. Otherwise, the unity of the soul requires the help of no duality or secondary substance in order to be united with soul unity. There is no object of sense, whether visible, tangible, audible, of taste or smelling, that can affect the unconnected soul. All things and their powers are contained in the all-powerful and all-comprehensive soul. These powers are displayed throughout the world, but the soul is as void as the empty air. O Raghav, mental deception presents the phenomena of the three worlds, representing diverse forms according to the threefold nature of man. There are three methods of dispelling this delusion of the mind, namely, by the tranquility of the mind, by destroying its desires, and by abandonment of acts. The world is a crushing mill with its lower and upper stones of the earth and heaven. Our desires are the cords that constantly drag us under it. Therefore, Ram, break off these occurs. Our ignorance of a spiritual knowledge is the cause of all our errors. But our acquaintance with it leads us to the endless joy and ultimately to Brahman himself. A living being, having proceeded from Brahman and travelled over the earth at pleasure, in the end turns to Brahman through his knowledge of him. Ram, all things have sprung from one being, who is perfect joy itself, inconceivable and without decay in its nature. All these things are like the rays of that light, or like the light of that everlasting fire. These are like lines on the leaves of trees, and like the curls and waves on the surface of sea. They are like ornaments made of that gold, and like the heat and cold of fire and water. Thus, the three worlds exist in the thought of the divine mind. It has sprung from the mind of God, and it rests in its same state with the all-comprehensive mind. This mind is called Brahma, who is the soul of all existence. He, being known, the world is known also. And He is the knower of all. He gives us the knowledge of all things. This all-pervasive being is explained to us by the learned with labels like soul, intellect, and Brahma, used both in scriptures and in popular language. The pure notion that we have of an everlasting being, apart from all ideas from physical senses and impressions, is called consciousness and soul. This consciousness or intelligent soul is much more transparent than the ethereal sky. It is the fullness that contains the plenitude of the world as a disjoint and distinct reflection of itself. The knowledge that the unreal reflection of world is a separate existence is the cause of all our ignorance and error. But the view of their existence in the mirror of the Supreme Soul blends them all to myself also. Now, Ram, you have a bodiless soul of the form of pure consciousness. You can have no cause to fall into the error of being sorry or afraid of the vanities of the world. How can the embodied soul be affected by the passions and feelings of the body? It is only the ignorant and unintelligent who are subject to vain suspicions about unrealities. Even the indestructible consciousness of the unintelligent is not destroyed by the destruction of their bodies. How then should the intelligent be afraid of their dissolution? Consciousness is irresistible in its course and roves about the solar path. It is the intellectual part that makes the man and not the outer body. The soul, called the inner person or Purush, whether it abides in the body or not, whether it is intelligent or otherwise, never dies upon the death of the body. Whatever miseries you meet with it, this transient world, they all appertain to the body and not to the intangible soul or consciousness. The intellectual soul is removed from the region of the mind. It is not approached by the pleasures and pains affecting the body and mind. The soul that has curbed its earthly desires after the dissolution of its prison house of the body flies to its seat in the spirit of Brahman in the same manner as a bee lying hidden under the cover of lotus petals in the darkness of the night takes to its heavenward flight by the dawning light of the day. It is life known to be frail and living state to be a transient scene, they say, O Ram. What is lost by the loss of this prison house of the body? And what is that you mourn for? Think therefore, O Ram, on the nature of truth and mind, and not about the errors of ignorance. Be free from your earthly desires, and know that the sinless soul to be void of all desires. The intellectual soul, being tranquil and transparent, a mere witness of our doings, without any doing or desire of its own, receives the reflection of the God without desire, just as a mirror reflects the images of things. The soul, as said before, a translucent particle, reflects the images of all worlds in itself, like a polished gem reflects the rays of light in its bosom. The relation between the detached soul and the world is like that of mirror and its reflections. The difference and identity of the soul and the world are of the same kind. As the activities of living beings have a free play with the rising sun, so the duties of the world are fully discharged by the rising of consciousness. As soon as you get rid of your errors of the substantiality of the world, you come to the consciousness of it being a vacuum resting in the Spirit of God. As the nature of a lighted lamp is to spread its light all around, so the nature of mental philosophy is to enlighten us with the real state of the soul. The essence of the Supreme Soul at first gave rise to the mind, which spreads out the universe with its network of endless varieties. It was like the sky issuing out of the infinite emptiness and assuming the shape of blue atmosphere, which is also nothing. Removal of desire melts down and dissolves the mist of ignorance from the face of consciousness. Then appears the bright light of the one infinite and uncreated God, like the clear sky of autumn after the clouds disperse. At first, the mind grows out from the Supreme Soul with all its activities and takes the nature of the lotus-born Brahma by its desire of creation. It stretches out a variety of worlds by its creative will, like fancied apparitions appearing before the imagination of deluded children. Non-entity appears like entity before us. It dies away at death and reappears with our new birth. The mind itself takes its rise from divine consciousness and displays itself in the substance of the divine soul, like waves playing on the surface of the waters of the deep. With this third book on creation, that is Utpatti Khanda, is completed, and we will rest with this session here itself, and that next session will be on book 4, and that will be on existence, which is called Isthiti Khanda. So until then, Shivoham friends, will meet again tomorrow by grace of Lord Ram. Shivoham.